Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, another news and rumor video. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, a few news updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Devils, Blues, Habs, Golden Knights, and other teams, which are all the updates from our past little while coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we have a very interesting one here to talk about. So we'll start off, as we usually do in our news and rumor videos, with some signings. So we saw a handful of signings from over the 6th and the 7th. So we'll start with the signings that happened over on the 6th. That was first with Jacob Dobes. Dobes is a solid young goaltending prospect. Actually got some NHL action last year, putting up a 2.74 GAA and 909 save percentage in 16 games as Montembeau's backup. Signed a 2-year contract extension, AAV of $965,000. So my guess would be the Canadians will give him every opportunity to be the backup to Montembeau this year. And I do think long term Dobes could be the team's starter. So 2 years and $965,000 for what could be a solid backup. Not a bad deal there for the Habs. Then we saw New York Islanders sign Mark Gacom, who got his first taste of NHL action last year. Bottom 6 guy call-up option. 25-year-old center to a 1-year deal, AV of $900,000. So it's a 1-year deal under league minimum. If it doesn't work out, they can bury him in the minors. That's not a bad deal there for the Islanders. And if Gacom can work out quite well, he could be a solid bottom 6 forward. So very interesting note there. But the Islanders do sign Gacko. Then we saw Vegas Golden Knights sign 3 players to identical 1-year league minimum deals. That's RFA Cole Schwind, RFA Jonas Romberg, and RFA Raphael Lavoie. Schwind was claimed off of waivers as well as Lavoie at the very beginning of last year. Schwind actually worked quite well as a bottom 6 guy, 13th, 14th forward, could work as a 4th liner. Actually worked out quite well for the Vegas Golden Knights in his first taste of NHL action. Lavoie played mostly at the AHL level, but he's a young prospect who still looks like he could be a solid bottom 6 forward. And then Jonas Romberg is a left winger who has been called upon a couple of times over the past couple of years. One of the Vegas Golden Knights' own draft selections, 26-year-old left wingers. So some interesting pickups here. 1-year league minimum for all these guys is pretty good. Actually, Schwind's is an $825,000 deal, so it's a little bit more for Schwind, but he proved himself last year. So very interesting note there, but a couple of really solid value signings as Romberg, Lavoie, and Schwind all get 1-year deals at under $1 million to remain with the Vegas Golden Knights. Then we saw the New York Rangers sign one of the former Vegas Golden Knights prospects, and that's Brisson. 1-year league minimum deal. He's a 23-year-old left winger. He was a solid pickup from the New York Rangers as part of the Riley Smith deal, former first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights. I do think has potential to be a solid middle 6 forward going forward for the New York Rangers. So 1-year league minimum, that's a steal of a deal in my opinion for the Rangers. And I do think they're getting a pretty good player here by signing Brisson. And then the St. Louis Blues signed 2 players to depth deals, and that's Hunter Skinner on the defensive side and Vadim Zherenko on the goaltending side, both 1-year league minimum. Zherenko's like a solid 3rd, 4th string goaltender. Skinner at this point is an AHL player who could be a call-up option. So 1-year league minimum for some added goaltending and defensive depth, signing some RFAs. Not bad move there from the St. Louis Blues, and definitely a very interesting signing there. And then on July 7th, we saw 3 signings, 2 big ones, one lower end one. The lower end one was in Washington as they have signed Sheldon Rempal to a 1-year league minimum deal. Rempal spent last year, I think, with the Vegas Golden Knights. Hasn't bounced around over the past couple of years. He's 29 years old. He was a UFA. He doesn't even have a new contract, so the Caps signed him. He's probably going to be an AHL player, but I could definitely see him be a call-up option if the Caps run through some injuries. So a solid pickup here for the Caps. And then 2 RFAs got extended. First, it was in Philadelphia with Cam York, as York gets a 5-year contract extension with the AAV of $5.15 million. A beautiful signing there from the Philadelphia Flyers as they're able to extend Cam York. So really good stuff there. Like, I think that's a little bit too much given how York's performed over the past couple of years. But if York can turn into that solid top pair, top 4 defenseman that a lot of people think he can be, I think that'll be a really solid pickup there for the Flyers. Meanwhile, for the Utah Mammoth, after electing to take into salary arbitration just a few hours earlier, the Utah Mammoth have signed Zac McBain to a 5-year extension with an AAV of $4.25 million. A beautiful signing there from Utah. I think it's definitely an overpayment. I thought McBain would have gone between $2.5 million. So I think over 4, definitely an overpayment. But but he signed for the next 5 years. He's only 25 years old. He can work as a third or fourth line center, and I think going forward, he's going to be a solid pickup here for the Utah Mammoth. So very interesting note there. But McBain in Utah, York in Philadelphia, Rempal in Washington, Skinner Drenko in St. Louis, Schwind, Lavoie, and Romberg in Vegas, Dobes in Montreal, Gakkom in NYI, and Brisson in NYR have all signed extensions, and they're all going to be signed with their new clubs for the next couple of seasons. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a few updates. So first, in the Dallas Stars organization, sort of like we talked about in our last video with Mark Letestu, the Dallas Stars have signed Toby Petersen, another former NHL player, to be the head coach of the AHL affiliates for the Dallas Stars, the Texas Stars. So very interesting note there. It's a solid pickup there for the Dallas Stars. I mean, they need a new head coach at the AHL level after the previous head coach got opportunities elsewhere. So Toby Petersen, we'll see how he does with the AHL head coach. Maybe eventually could get some NHL opportunities, but very interesting hire there from Dallas as they've got their new AHL head coach. Meanwhile, Detroit hires Michael Leighton as a goalie coach. So very interesting note there. You know, the Red Wings haven't had overly great goaltending, so they change up the goaltending coach. Now have Michael Leighton in as the new goalie coach. So a very interesting hire there from the Red Wings, and hopefully that does help their goaltending position a little bit. But some very interesting low-end hires as Detroit signs Leighton as a goalie coach, and Petersen is now the new head coach of the AHL Dallas. So very interesting note there. We also saw two players retire from the NHL. One more of a depth player, AHL level guy. Another one more of a prominent NHL level player, and that was Zac Dalle and Tyler Johnson. Dalle had 16 goals, 16 assists, 32 points, and 168 games of NHL action. Split a whole bunch of time between teams like Columbus, Florida, and a couple of other teams. Was mostly an AHL level guy, but they got called up on occasions. Was a solid bomb 6 forward when it was called upon. So a very interesting retirement there as Dalle has officially called it a career. Same thing with Tyler Johnson, the longtime Tampa Bay Lightning player, also played in Chicago, had a short stint in Boston and a couple of other places. Wound up having 193 goals, 240 assists for 433 points in 747 games. Was a really solid guy. Did have some injury troubles throughout his career, but was a really solid middle 6'4", produced quite well, as you can see by his stat line. So quite surprising there. But like we said last year, Tyler Johnson signed a 1-year deal in Boston just before the season started, and then by I think it was November or December, they mutually agreed to terminate his contract. So just don't think there was a market out there for Tyler Johnson. So he decides to retire, and same thing with Zac Dalle, who at this point is just an AHL level forward. So a very interesting note there. But Johnson and Dalle have both called it a career and retired from the NHL. So very interesting note there. And then going over to a couple of things when it involves some free agents. First with the Vancouver Canucks, apparently they were in and really wanted to try and acquire Christian Dvorak in free agency. Now we know they weren't able to acquire him, but we know this team needs some help in the second or third line as a center. They have Hito who can play second or third line minutes as a center, but they really want another center who could really work well with them. So they really wanted to try to obtain Dvorak to be a solid second or third line center for that team. They apparently offered him a 3-year contract with AAV of $4 million, but Dvorak instead decided to bet on himself and sign in Philadelphia a 1-year, $5.4 million deal. So very interesting note there, but it does seem like the Vancouver Canucks had some major interest in Christian Dvorak and even offered him a contract before he wound up signing in Philadelphia to try and help their center problems. So very interesting note there. That's a little bit surprising that they went after Dvorak, but they didn't get him at the end of the day. So very interesting note there. And then we also heard from recent reports that the Toronto Maple Leafs may have some major interest in trying to sign Jack Roslovic. We know that the Leafs are trying to rework their offense with Mitch Marner now long gone. They acquired Nick Waugh, Matthias Michelli, and a couple of other lower end guys, but they still seem to want to add maybe 1 to 2 more forwards. Roslovic could work really well. Apparently he has connections to the Leafs because him and Matthews used to play together, so that could be a solid pickup here. Roslovic showed in the Carolina he could be a solid middle 6 guy and put up some goals. So I'm not sure what sort of a deal would look like if the Leafs want to sign Roslovic. Like I'm thinking probably a 1 to 2 year deal at around like $2 million AAV would be my guess. So very interesting note there. But apparently, according to some recent reports, the Maple Leafs, who want to try and improve their forward group, have some major interest in Jack Roslovic. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But those are all the updates from the past little while. As the Leafs have interest in trying to sign Jack Roslovic, the Canucks offered Christian Dvorak a contract. Zac Dalle and Ty Johnson are both retired from the NHL, and then Toby Petersen's the AHL head coach for Dallas, and Michael Leighton is the new goalie coach in Detroit. So very interesting note there. And next, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So only a couple of things to talk about, just a handful of things. We're going to start today's video with the trade rumor portion with the Vegas Golden Knights. So according to David Pagnotta, he mentions that the Golden Knights are currently looking for a new place for Ben Hutton to play next year, according to David Pagnotta. He says the Knights still need a little bit of cap space, especially if they want to try and go after a guy like Rasmus Anderson. Apparently Hutton, being a 6'7" guy, is apparently expendable. I think he's got 1 year left at just under $1 million, and the Vegas Golden Knights are looking to try and move him somewhere. I could see the Golden Knights get like a 5th or 6th round pick in return, or maybe like a low-end prospect. I don't think it'll be a great return, and I could see the Knights try and keep Hutton to be like their sort of spare defenseman at the NHL level, especially after the injury to Pietrangelo. So very interesting note there, but Pagnotta does say the Knights are looking to move off of Ben Hutton, and we could see a trade happen at some point. I personally do think it's less likely he gets dealt, but if he does get dealt, like there would be probably 5 or 6 teams out there who would have like a 5th or 6th round pick, who have some cap space, who could use a solid 6'7" defenseman on their team. So as much as I do think it's more likely Hutton stays in Vegas than gets dealt, I wouldn't rule out the fact that the Knights could wind up moving on from Ben Hutton, so we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Vegas Golden Knights potentially moving off of Ben Hutton. Going over to Frank Seravalli, he mentioned a few things. First, when he was talking about the Utah Mammoths, he says before Utah selected Caleb Desnoyers, there was a holdup at the draft potentially surrounding the New York Islanders trying to acquire a number 4th round pick. He says he never figured out what happened at the end of things, but he does say that it at least seemed like there was conversations involving NYI and Utah and the 4th overall pick. We know the Islanders really wanted to get James Hagens, so they were trying to trade up to get Hagens. Now, I don't know if it's the 16th and 17th overall pick they were trying to package together to give Utah to get the 4th overall pick. I also heard some rumblings on draft day about Matt Barzal, and there's also been some very outlandish rumblings about Ilya Sorokin. So like either Barzal, Sorokin, or the 16th and 17th overall draft selections, I think would have perked up Utah's ears to try and acquire. So very, very interesting out there, but it does sound like Utah and NYI were talking about a draft day swap involving the 4th overall pick that would have allowed the Islanders to get James Hagens. Not sure what would have gone exactly to Utah's way, but very interesting out there. But at the end of the day, Utah kept the pick and took NYA, and the Islanders wound up taking Eklund and Aitchison with the 16th and 17th overall pick, and then Trey Barzal. So very interesting out there. Seravalli also wonders if the Montreal Canadiens could look to move at some point Mike Matheson. Matheson is entering the final year of his deal. I think he's making just over $4 million this past couple of seasons. He's actually worked out quite well in the Canadiens organization, but Seravalli says that he does want to sign an extension that seems to work for the Montreal Canadiens and is really on like a sort of more team-friendly deal than Matheson wants. He does wonder if maybe the Canadiens move Matheson. Now, I don't think it'll be in season because I do think that the Canadiens are a really, really good team and could probably make a run at a top 3 spot in the Atlantic this year. I'm not exactly sure if they want to move Matheson, given the fact he's one of the few veterans on this team. I could maybe see it, but I think it'll have to be for a veteran defenseman back. So we shall wait and see on that. But if Matheson probably wants like a really big contract and isn't really wanting to take like a discount to stay in Montreal, I could definitely see the Montreal Canadiens consider moving him if it made sense for Montreal and they're able to get some sort of a veteran in return. But it's definitely a very interesting concept to see that the Habs could try and move Matheson for the right price if Matheson doesn't want to extend in Montreal, so we'll have to wait and see on that. According to Frank Seravalli, he continues to mention Jordan Kyrou's name even after his no movement clause is kicked in. We heard about Kyrou's name up until July 1st because his no movement clause on his new contract hadn't kicked in yet, and there was a lot of talk that the Blues might want to try and get out of that contract. He never wound up getting moved. But according to Frank Seravalli, he says the Canadiens are still trying to get Jordan Kyrou even after his no movement clause is kicked in. And Seravalli also mentions that the Blues may still be motivated to move on from Jordan Kyrou. So that's a little bit surprising in my opinion. I do think Kyrou's a solid player, solid top 6 forward, can really work well with a whole bunch of teams. He seems to be connected a whole bunch to Montreal, and we know the Habs are really okay with making some big splashes. I mean, add Kyrou to a top 6 that already has guys like Slavkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield. That would be very, very scary to face for a lot of Atlantic Division teams, and we know the Habs have the assets to pull off a deal, so it'll be very interesting out there. But now with no movement clauses kicked in, it'll be a lot more difficult because Kyrou has a whole bunch of say in where he goes, so he could wind up staying in St. Louis. That's a very likely possibility, one I think is probably the most likely in this scenario. I still don't believe Kyrou will get moved, but Seravalli is a connected insider, and he does say that the Blues still seem to be motivated needed to move him. And the Habs are still trying to pry Kyrou out of St. Louis. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I could definitely see the Habs be one of the teams who would have some interest in Kyrou, even though Kyrou's no movement clause is kicked in. And lastly, going over to Elliotte Friedman, he mentions about the New Jersey Devils that Dougie Hamilton's bonus in his contract was recently paid on July 1st, and his contract went from a full no movement clause to a partial no trade clause. So he wonders if Dougie Hamilton's a possibility to get moved. He's heard his name out there in trade talks very sparsely, but he has heard his name with a couple of different teams, and it seems the Devils are discussing a Dougie Hamilton trade. Now, we know the Devils have a logjam on the blue line. They have guys like Casey and Nemec, who both should be top 6 defensemen next year on the Devils team, but would probably be challenging for like a 6-7 role, potentially even being an 8th defenseman because of how deep that Devils team is. We also know that Hamilton gets injured a whole bunch over the past couple of years, spent a whole bunch of time on long-term injury reserve. So with all of that in mind, is there a possibility we could see the New Jersey Devils make a Dougie Hamilton deal? I guess it's a possibility. Hamilton, I think, has 2 or 3 years left on his contract, a $9 million cap hit, so it wouldn't be easy, but he's a top pair right shot defenseman, puck moving guy, can put you up a whole bunch of points. And if the Devils really were open to moving him and trying to acquire maybe like a top 4 defenseman in return, maybe on the younger side of things, maybe some more forward help, like I'm not exactly sure who they would try and target, whether it be a futures-based package or more of a player-for-player swap, but either way, it definitely does seem like the Devils could wind up moving Dougie Hamilton at some point. I definitely do think it's a possibility. I've heard Hamilton's name when I did my Devils offseason preview video. I mentioned Hamilton as a likely guy who could wind up being dealt. So we will have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on the New Jersey Devils. As according to Elliotte Friedman, they could be a team who looks to try and move Dougie Hamilton in the very near future. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think Dougie Hamilton gets moved? Do you think Jordan Kyrou gets moved? Do you think Mike Matheson gets moved? Would you have been surprised if Utah traded the 4th overall pick to NYI on draft day? And do you think Vegas winds up moving Ben Hutton? Definitely your thoughts on all of that. Plus all of the other movement we talked about with the updates and the signings. Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That is all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video and for the subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to for all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comments. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I also have a blog to my news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I've linked to the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.